Sanani Dumelang, good evening and welcome to the Friday edition of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. It's episode 214 of the Private Property Podcast. And if you're joining us for the first time, you have missed out on quite a number of great episodes. So do make sure that you go to our Facebook or YouTube page to catch up on all the great content that we have brought to your screens. Now, to all our regular viewers, welcome back. You know how we do it every single weekday. At 7 p.m., we get to tackle a hot property topic and help each other out on best navigating our property journey. It doesn't matter whether you're looking to sell, to buy, to build, you're a tenant, or looking to grow your property portfolio. This is the podcast for your property needs. And of course, do also check out our website on www.privateproperty.co.za under the advice section for more property advice that will best equip you to make the right property decision. Now, while you're on our website, do make sure that you take part in our Sherlock Holmes competition. This is a competition that we're running for the next 12 weeks. We're currently on week 7. And all you have to do is to crack the riddle and to solve the riddle that we share with you every single Monday morning right here across our social media platforms. And if you think you know where the riddle leads you, then do make sure that you enter the competition online, where you will get to stand a chance of walking away with the 5,000 Rand voucher every single Friday right here on the Private Property Podcast. Now, another way that we're keeping things interesting and spicy with the Sherlock Holmes competition is that every Wednesdays and Thursdays, we also give away a 500 Rand cash spot prize. And all you need to do to walk away with that money is to be watching us live on air in order to be able to claim your prize. That certainly is an easy way for you to win here on the Private Property Podcast, as well as on our social media platforms. Now, talking about our social media platforms, something else that you're able to certainly chew on our social media platforms, other great shows that we bring to your screens. I am talking about the First Time Home Buyers Show with St. Clausen that comes to your screens every single Wednesday at 8 p.m., where she gets to be in conversation with somebody who has walked the first time home buying journey and get their experience of how that was, what some of the mistakes they made, and what are some of the things that they learned, so that you are best equipped not to make some of those mistakes. And if you've walked that journey and you want to be featured on the show, then do slide into our DMs, and ST and the team will be in touch with you to see if they can feature your story on the First Time Home Buyers Show. Now, for all those of us who have green fingers and perhaps have an interest in agriculture, well, the Farming Podcast with Mbali Nwogo is the podcast for you. Every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m., you can get a snapshot of what you can expect on all things agriculture. And if there's still a topic that you'd like Mbali to tackle, then again, do drop a message and she and the team will make sure that they get to that specific topic. Now, we are always trying to find different ways to do things differently here on Private Property. And I know that we have now shifted gears slightly, and that is, of course, with the Home Shoppers Show with Chad. It used to come to your screens over the weekend, but it now comes to your screens every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. So every single weekday at 8 p.m., you can certainly look forward to another show, of course, after the Private Property Podcast with myself, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. We definitely do have a whole host of different shows that you can tap into across our social media platforms. So do make sure that you keep engaging the content. And if there's still more that you want to see from us, well, do let us know, because we absolutely love hearing from you. Now, on this Friday edition of the show, I did say on Monday that this week we're going to be tackling a lot of topics that have to do with living in community schemes and different things that have to do with community schemes. I think with so many of us increasingly living in community schemes or investing in community schemes, it's so important to get acquainted with, the comings and goings of living in a community scheme, who's responsible for what, and really better understanding what our rights are and who's meant to be doing what. And something that's, I think, is very difficult to have a conversation about, but is so necessary, especially given that we're currently facing very difficult economic times. I think for so many owners, this is a topic that I think so many of us can probably certainly understand why we need to be acquainted with, because it's a very difficult conversation. And this evening, we're looking at how struggling sectional title owners can achieve financial stability. And we're going to look at both, the individual sectional title owner, but also in the event where your community scheme almost, I'll say, in its entirety is currently going through a financial difficulty, because that is a situation that I think sometimes we tend to find ourselves in, whether as an individual or certainly you've bought into a community scheme only to later find out that it's not in the best financial situation. Now, to help us better understand, how we can make sure that we get out of, financial difficulty, what measures we need to be putting in place, I'm joined this evening by Willie Roos, who is the CEO at Stratafin. Willie, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Zama. Thank you for having us, and thank you for letting us share some of our experience and knowledge in respect of this topic with your viewers.
Willie, I think one of the things that is almost always distressing for, and I'll first start with the individual, owner, is you sometimes buy into a community scheme, and with some owners, they just weren't aware of the associated costs of living in a community scheme. Others were. And as the months kind of go by, and we are now, in the middle of COVID, and many people have had their finances negatively affected, unfortunately, some owners are slowly falling behind with making payments to the body corporates, or making levy payments, and are finding themselves in a rather difficult financial position. Perhaps share with us, Willie, how individual owners who are finding themselves in financially difficult positions when it comes to paying for the monthly levies and other associated costs in the body corporate, how should they go about handling that particular situation? Because unfortunately, so many people have you just want to, hide your head and not do anything. Letters of demands get sent and you still kind of ignore it. But you and I know that isn't necessarily the best way to go about it. So how should we be approaching that particular issue in the event where we fall behind on making those monthly payments?
Absolutely, that is not the correct way of dealing with it. Obviously, sectional title levies is the lifeblood of any community scheme, and if there is no levies, then that scheme will eventually falter and will have serious problems, and which we can discuss later on. However, when an owner gets into a situation as a result of COVID, or whatever the financial reason is why that person cannot pay his levies, the best thing to do is to actually start speaking to your trustees, to let them understand what your financial situation is, to provide them with the necessary documentation, your bank statements, your salary slip, and all the documentation that can show them what you really can afford at this stage. You must then understand that what they're going to do is they're going to afford you an opportunity to pay the arrears over a period of time, but at some stage you will have to catch up with the levies, because if you don't catch up, then all the other people in the scheme are prejudiced by the non-payment of those levies. So the first thing is to pull your head out of the sand and to start speaking to your trustees and to your managing agent, explain your situation, and try and reach an agreement for the payment of whatever you possibly can at that stage, and then to catch up at a later stage. The other possibilities, obviously, is to, if you realize that you can't pay the levies and you are staying in the property yourself, is to maybe let out the property, or maybe let out a room in the property, which we see is quite prevalent in the inner cities where that happens, to get some income in that sense, and to be able then to pay your levies. And then the last option, obviously, is to look at selling the property. If you can't pay for a property and you cannot pay the levies, at the end of the day, it is better to cut your losses earlier on. The longer you take, the more interest will accrue, the more difficult it will become to sell. The complex will go down, and at the end of the day, you won't achieve a proper price for your property, and you will lose out, and you will be stuck with that property and not being able to sell it. So as soon as you realize that your financial position is not going to become better, then it is prudent thing to sell your property rather than to stay in it and just go head in the sand and hope that something won't happen.
Now, Willie, I definitely want to get a sense from you in the event where you then approach the trustees about your financial situation. Have you found instances where trustees, I'll say, are unreasonable? So are they able to actually say, you know what, we don't accept that you're essentially in a bad situation. Levies are supposed to be paid at X amount and at X time, and they refuse to essentially enter into an agreement with you to be able to pay the levies or to catch up with the levies. Have you found instances where that happens, and how can the individual sort of best get into an agreement? Because I think that's an important thing. You don't want to end up having countless letters of demands and all kinds of debt collectors always approaching you. Have you seen instances of that nature coming up?
I must tell you that I think that most of the boards of trustees that we deal with are reasonable and have tried over a very long period of time to reach agreements with these owners to start paying the debt and to make some arrangement for the payment thereof. So very seldom do we see that boards don't go into an arrangement with a debtor. I think that once you've run a scheme and you've been a trustee in a scheme, you understand the legal cost associated to the collection of a debt. And you understand that by going out to try and collect this debt, it's going to cost the scheme a fortune. And you can go a bit into the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act and the old Sectional Titles Act. There's a difference between the two. In terms of the Sectional Titles Act, all costs related to the collection in respect of that debt was payable by the owner who is in arrears, where in terms of the new Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, the owner is only liable for the tax costs or agreed costs. So there's a difference between a tax cost and all costs. It's like a medical aid scheme where the doctor charges at a certain rate and the medical aid scheme pay at a lower rate, and you are then liable for the difference between the two. And it's exactly the same in the legal fraternity. A party and party scale is a lower scale than an attorney and client scale, which is the scale that the attorney will charge the body corporate to do the collection. Which then means if you can only put the party and party account onto the debtor's levy account, then the rest of the owners is liable for the balance of that legal fees. So therefore, we see that most trustees and most boards of trustees are very, they're prepared to go into an arrangement because they understand that it will cost them less money to go through the process in that way rather than go the legal process.
We are taking your questions and comments on this issue of struggling sectional title owners and how they can achieve financial stability. And so far we focus on the individual, and we will be talking in a little bit about what then happens if the scheme almost in its entirety is currently facing financial difficulty. We've seen a lot of instances where some of the schemes face a lot of financial difficulty because the majority of their members are not making those monthly levy payments, and they in effect aren't able to pay the municipality and other service providers like the security that they have on the grounds. And that of course puts quite a lot of pressure for those owners who have bought into the community scheme, who pay on time. Sometimes you may find that you yourself are not the one living there, but it might be your tenant who's living there. So they get to experience the pressure of services getting cut by the municipality because payment has not been made. We are taking your questions and comments, and I see we've already got a question from Damishka Pillay on Facebook asking, can we be charged interest if our levies are not paid on time?
So the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act and the rules that promulgated under the Act makes it possible for the trustees to determine an interest rate that is payable on the arrears. That interest rate should not exceed the maximum in accordance with the Credit Act. There is a bit of confusion what specific interest rate in the Credit Act is being referred to, but it's generally being accepted that that is in respect of incidental credit. So therefore, the maximum that interest rate that can be charged is 2% per month, compounded monthly in arrears. So that is what one would see generally is the interest rate that would be charged on the arrear levies.
Another question here coming from Megan Rath, who asks, what about getting too low offers? Can you wait it out then? And really, this is in respect to how you were, advising earlier that in the event where you're an individual who's struggling to make payments, one of the potential options could be essentially to sell your particular unit. So in the event where the different offers that you keep getting in are too low, what are I'll say the pros and cons. I can already just think of the negatives of waiting it out because obviously that amount is sort of building up bit by bit.
Sure. I would think that the best way to deal with it is to go to the body corporate and to the board of trustees, say to them, this is the offer that I've accepted, that I've received. Is there a possibility that we can deal with the levies? Is there a possibility that I might be able to get a discount on that levy? Speak to the bank, find out if the bank will be prepared to accept a lower offer, because the banks also understand what the economic climate is. They don't want to sit with these properties in possession because it's costing them money. They will have to pay the levies if they would buy back that property. So they would not want to be in that situation. So if you negotiate, it is normally possible to come to some sort of an arrangement with the body corporate or the trustees that acting on behalf of the body corporate and the bank, because you can actually never attain a price that is higher than the value of the property. And if your levies exceed the value, you would never be able to sell that property. So at some stage, somebody must make the decision that this is the cutoff point, and we need to cut off here, and we need to determine this is what we're going to collect. We're then going to get a new owner in here that will hopefully be paying levies, and that will put the body corporate in a better situation.
I'm this evening in conversation with Willie Roos, who is the CEO at Stratafin, and we're looking at how struggling sectional title owners can achieve financial stability. Now, Willie, we focused a lot on the individual and the various ways that they can go about mitigating the financial difficulty that they find themselves in. I want us to change gears a bit and look at, sectional title schemes that they almost in their entirety find themselves in financially difficult times, because I've seen there's an increasing number of these schemes where a lot of their members are unfortunately not able to make the monthly payments. And of course, this has a knock-on effect. Perhaps really first just shed light on the knock-on effect of owners not paying levies on time, because I think sometimes there's a sentiment from owners that the managing agent is just out to get the money, but the reality is the money that's being paid every month, there are services that it goes towards. So perhaps take us through what the knock-on effect when owners do not pay their levies on time.
Absolutely. The body corporate is obliged by law to have two funds, the administrative fund and then the reserve fund, which look at the 10-year maintenance plan for the maintenance of the building. Now, the administrative fund is the day-to-day running cost of that body corporate, which is the security, the services, water, electricity, sewer, and all the other normal cleaning, the day-to-day stuff that needs to happen at the body corporate. So firstly, that would fall behind. So the council won't be paid, security won't be paid, and eventually those services will be suspended by either the council or the service provider, and then that has an effect obviously on the building as well. Because now people don't get services, the complex doesn't get cleaned, and there's no water, no electricity, and a plan needs to be made to get those services back into the body corporate. So that would be the first effect. Obviously, the second effect would be that there would be no money that would go to the maintenance, which then would look at the long-term maintenance of the building. So you're looking at the painting, the making sure that the roofs are sealed, that no water is coming into the building. So all the long-term stuff that needs to take place in respect of those buildings then also get neglected. The effect of that would at the end be that owners would lose value. So owners that are paying their levies will lose wealth. The body corporate's financials will be in a terrible state. The banks won't finance or will be very slow to finance. It will have an effect on the price. You will see prices drop in those buildings. You will eventually see overcrowding, and you will see the hijacking of those buildings. And the scheme will become completely dysfunctional. And the only way that that scheme can then get out of that is by being placed under administration, a special levy being levied against all owners, even the paying owners, in respect of what is outstanding to the council and service providers, and then to try and recover that money, which eventually will then have the effect that those properties will be sold in execution to recover whatever is outstanding. So it will have a drastic effect on owners.
And really, in a moment, I actually want us to get into then how those struggling schemes can go about trying to get out of the financially terrible place that they find themselves in. I want us to address a few questions that we've received from Facebook. Ubong Sabakwena asking, am I wrong to assume that this problem is bigger in complexes with many units than in those?
So we see the problem in larger and smaller complexes. We see the problem in larger and smaller complexes.
We're talking about this of a, is it? Yes, Willie, make it.
Yeah, so we were talking off air where we said you find the problem in larger and smaller schemes. However, in the smaller schemes, you have fewer contributors. And if you don't have those contributors and you've got out of a scheme of 10 people, 5 or 6 that don't contribute, then actually the scheme will collapse because more than 50% of the owners are not contributing. Where in your larger schemes, if you have 200 units in the scheme and 20 don't pay, then obviously it does have an effect, but the effect is smaller on the owners and on the upkeep and maintenance of the building. Are you there?
And another question here coming through from Megan Rath asking, how often can levies be increased? We have a...
Hello? Listening?
And levies have been increased twice in probably experience. And when we come back, we will be taking more of your questions and comments. Welcome back to episode 214 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Khumalo. Now, this evening, we're looking at how struggling sectional title owners can achieve financial stability. I'm in conversation with Willie Roos, who's the CEO at Stratafin. We've already gone through, a whole list of things that an individual can do, and I've started touching on what a sectional scheme can do in the event where they're struggling financially. And really painted such a great picture of the knock-on effect when owners do not pay their levies on time and on a regular basis. We are taking your questions and comments on this issue. We've got a question here from Megan Rath, who asks, how often can levies be increased? We have a flat in Toti and levies have been increased twice in 5 months, and the body corporate has been spending the savings on unnecessary building upgrades.
So in terms of the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, a Board of Trustees has to prepare a budget which then take into consideration all the expenses of that body corporate for the next financial year. All of that has to be put into the budget, and then that budget must be brought before an AGM, where the owners then approve that budget with or without amendments. Obviously, if the budget is approved with amendments, then certain items that were amended will be left out of the budget and one would not be able to pay for those. That budget would then be applicable until the next financial year. The trustees are, however, allowed to raise a special levy in respect of expenses which were not expected and which were not budgeted for. And they will be able, so for emergency sake, they will be able to then raise an additional special levy in respect of those expenses. That budget should then be in place for the next financial year, and a new budget should then be drawn up once that financial year is drawing to a close, and that must then be again presented to the owners that will then pay in accordance with their participation quotas.
Now, Willie, perhaps take us through then how Stratafin helps body corporates when it comes to their finances, because I'm sure so many who may find themselves in instances where they're struggling as a collective to make sure that they have the necessary funds to pay their various service providers. You already so greatly pointed out the knock-on effect to what gets affected when the levies aren't collected on time every single month. How does then Stratafin go about assisting those particular schemes?
So Stratafin has a unique product. We are the only people in South Africa that actually offer this product to the community schemes. What we do is we purchase the outstanding arrear levies that is owing to the body corporate. We assess the levy book. We place a value on each and every debtor, the risk value, and we would then purchase that outstanding levy from the body corporate at an agreed rate. That money, once that is accepted by the Board of Trustees, that money is then paid over to the body corporate. It is not a loan. It is not repayable. It is a purchase of the outstanding levy book. Stratafin will then proceed to collect the outstanding levies at our risk and at our cost, and will go through the legal process to then recover that levy. We will try and make an arrangement with the debtors in respect of the payment of the arrear levies. But if they do not want to come to an arrangement, we obviously have to go through the legal process to then issue a summons, issue a letter of demand, eventually sell the property in execution to recover the outstanding amount. So the body corporate is placed in immediate funds with our product. There are no interest payable in respect of our product by the paying owners. The interest is payable by the debtor in respect of his debt owing to the body corporate at the rate that was determined by the trustees in respect of their debt.
Really, I'm going to squeeze in this last question because it's one of those questions that I know a lot of owners have had issues with for years now. And this question is coming from Keshni Danisa, asking if the maintenance of the building is not up to standard, for example, no water, lifts not operable, deteriorating conditions, etc., does the owner have a right to stop paying? This is, of course, stop paying levies.
Not at all. Unfortunately, our law does not make provision for owners to stop paying levies. Owners must at all times pay levies. You cannot set off. You cannot reduce your levy on your own. You have an obligation to pay levies, and that obligation remains in place.
And Willie, before I let you go, any final tips for our viewers at home who have bought into a sectional title and are finding that they're either A, struggling as an individual, or B, they've bought into a sectional title that's actually struggling financially? Any final tips for them in terms of what the next steps should be that can get them in the best financial position afterwards?
Sure. I think the first step is to budget correctly. We are giving out a budget template which will assist body corporates to actually draft a proper budget where all the PQs of all the different units are also into the spreadsheet, and that will then calculate what each and every owner has to pay in accordance with the PQ. So firstly, budget correctly, make provision for bad debts. So know that there are going to be people that don't pay. Make provision for that in your budget. Make provision for legal fees, so that you have fees to actually go and collect against those debtors. And if you haven't made provision for that and you don't have the money to collect, then speak to somebody like Stratafin that can assist the body corporate by purchasing those debts and giving the body corporate immediate cash flow for them to proceed with their obligations.
Well, really, that's a great place to leave it. And if you want to get in touch with Stratafin, we have shared their contact details down here below. And Willie and his team will certainly help you get out of those financial difficulties as a community scheme. I think one of the things that we are seeing and even anticipating this new year, as many of the schemes are probably entering their new financial year this March, is that there have been a lot of owners who unfortunately were not able to pay for all of their levies in the previous financial year, and a lot of that debt has carried on to the new year. So you almost want to get ahead of it as much as possible and to make sure that as a community scheme, you don't end up finding yourself in a difficult position where you're not able to pay for various services that keep the scheme running. Willie, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And that is Willie Roos, who is the CEO at Stratafin. Now, it is a Friday. We're going to go for a very quick break. And when we come back, I will be announcing the lucky winner of that 5,000 Rand voucher for our Sherlock Holmes competition. We'll be back just after this. Let's go. Welcome back to the Friday edition of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Khumalo. It is the time of the evening where we get to announce who the lucky winner is of our 5,000 Rand voucher for for our Sherlock Holmes competition. And if you want to be like this, lucky winner this evening, all you have to do is to go into our website on www.privateproperty.co.za, where you enter the Sherlock Holmes competition. Every Monday, we share a clue that we want you to crack. And if you can crack that riddle, then let us know on our website, and you could potentially be a lucky winner. Now, this week's winner is Lerato Mpahlele. Lerato Mpahlele, congratulations. You're the lucky winner of this week's Sherlock Holmes hunt. We do hope that you enjoy your 5,000 Rand voucher. And of course, if you want to be like Lerato, you know what to do. The riddle for week 8 is going to be coming up on Monday, so do watch out for it on Monday morning. Well, it's a Friday. I know that usually I say I'll be back on your screens on Monday, and I will be back on your screens on Monday. But this Friday evening, I do not leave you alone. Chad is going to bring you the Home Shoppers Show at 8 p.m. So until then, hoping you're going to stay home and stay safe.
Hi, I'm Julia Chen. I'm a restaurateur living in the Cape Town City Bowl. My restaurant Hallelujah is situated right in the heart of the city. Over the last few years, the influx of young professionals has created so many new and exciting things to see and do. The rejuvenation of the city has been something really special to experience. There are some really beautiful suburbs in our neighborhood. Nestled below the iconic Table Mountain lies Oranjezig and Tamboerskloof, filled with unique and beautiful homes. There's such a young vibe in the city, with an incredible blend of diverse cultures catering to everybody's desire. Within the city, there are so many genuine and passionate people, and you'll find them in places like the Woodstock Exchange, offering everything from handcrafted works of art to a culinary experience hard to forget. For those who enjoy the outdoors, Lion's Head and Table Mountain are phenomenal places to explore. Living in the City Bowl has definitely given me my dream lifestyle, and this is my neighborhood.